One of the things that really kills salespeople is a deal that gets stuck, an opportunity that seems to be progressing, and then all of a sudden we hit this place where it seems to stall. And many times we relate that to our buy cycle time. We have very long buying cycles. It could be 6, 12, 18 months, or in some cases, deals just get stuck and stay stuck. It's been estimated that the percentage of stuck deals can be anywhere from 35 to 40% in terms of no decisions and extending the buying cycle and all the challenges that are associated with that. Do we actually train salespeople, A, how to unstick deals if they have them, or even more importantly, B, how to prevent from getting a deal stuck at all? Well, coming up next, we'll talk to an expert. This is Sales Untraining, a very different kind of sales podcast. 3 out of 4 salespeople are failing. They're falling short of their revenue. Why doesn't sales training work? That's what this sales podcast is about. It's your weekly sales strategy guide designed to rewire your sales brain. Hey, welcome to Sales Untraining. Glad to have you on board, and it's going to be a fantastic episode. We are your weekly sales strategy guide designed to completely rewire your sales brain, and I hope you're starting down that path with me as you start to rewire some of your thought processes about how we train, or how we poorly train, depending on how you look at it, how we train our salespeople. And my expert guest, I'm so excited, James Muir. He wrote this phenomenal book. Look, you don't have a copy of this? If you're a salesperson or sales leader, you don't have one of these, you're making a big mistake. If you're just listening, it's called The Perfect Close by James Muir, The Secret to Closing Sales. And James, I got to tell you, I think I have read just about every book out there on closing sales. It seems like that. There's so many of them. And I put this one absolutely at the top of the list in terms of the technique, what you develop there. It's highly effective. I am a huge fan. Tell me a little bit about how you got to the book and how you developed this particular 2-question process.
Oh, well, you'll laugh at that. I'm an unintentional, accidental salesperson. I never expected to be in sales. I got drafted into sales.
Really?
It's kind of a long. Oh yeah, my dad owned a company, a rev cycle company. We opened up an office in another location. I went there to be the manager of this place, and to be high touch, I'd go out with the salespeople, right, to be the subject matter expert. And then one day, this a company that we had acquired, our main sales guy, he picked up and left and took half our clients with him.
Oh,
and my dad comes to me and says, "James, you're going to have to go out there and sell, or we're going to lose this business." I'm like, no pressure, right?
Sure.
So I mean, that was not at all what I thought my career path was going to be. And I had just moved. I bought a house. I had a car and all this stuff. And so all this money was supposed to be coming in for my commissions. I was so horrible. And anyway, so I got drafted into it. And I realized after a while, I could talk the talk and do the middle part of the sale, but I couldn't get anything closed. Right. And so I started reading everything that there was to read on this topic. Right. And I know you and I are both readers.
Sure.
And I took it all at face value, thinking it was the real deal. Like, okay, great. So I remember this really big deal that I'm working. They were already using one of our services, and the question was whether they're going to use our rev cycle service. And so I'm having dinner with the CEO and his COO, and at the opportune moment, I said, "So, do you want to go with package A, or do you want to go with package B?" Which those of you in the know would know that this is an alternate choice close, right? That's what I had prepared, because the book told me that's exactly how it works. You won't even believe what happened, Kelly. This guy pushes back from the table like I had poisoned his food or something. And he goes, "If you think that you're getting this business just because we use your other product, right, you are dead wrong. We are going to look at 3 different vendors." The way he said 3, it was like spit came out of his mouth. I'm back here like, oh my gosh, this is not working out like it said in the book. This is not happening. And he goes, "We're going to look at 3 other vendors, and we're going to pick the one that's the best one for us." Right. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that was not at all how it was supposed to go down. Right. And that guy, you know what? In the end, that guy did not pick us just to prove a point. It was like he knew a tactic was being used on him. And so what I
Oh,
learned later after reading lots of more stuff is that when you're selling a low ticket item, if you're selling fries and a drink or something like that, then alternate choice close works when the value of the thing that you're selling is low. But when it is high, it will actually backfire on you, just like that backfired on me. And I lost a sale at a really hard time in my career because I tried to use one of these traditional selling tactics that typical sales guy goes and looks on YouTube really quick to figure out what the closing approach that they'll use, and they might end up getting looped in to a horrible tactic like that one that I use. And so I have tried and failed at probably all the different things that you can think of from a closing perspective because I sucked at it. And so I accidentally discovered how to use the perfect close when I was working with a client. But I saw later when I'm managing my own teams, they all struggle with the same thing. And so that's how the book got written.
What's really interesting about that story is most people don't know the history of sales training and the development of all the books that we grew up with. With the exception of strategic selling and conceptual selling, Miller Hyman's books, which conceptual selling was my Bible in the late 80s, right. Early 90s. But all of the other books were written by guys like Ziegler and Hopkins and others who actually specialized in one call closes. So they needed to sort of steer you to a decision because they knew that if you got out the door or we didn't close the deal now, probably never going to get another shot at it, right? But in complex B2B sales, these sort of manipulative tactics, they don't work at all.
They don't.
But I love the perfect close because it's just a very natural question that makes sense. And if the answer is no, we just go to the next question. Hey, what does make sense as far as you're concerned? So I love that. But I think as well as I do that you can be a great closer and still be losing a lot of deals because you do a lot of things wrong in advance. And a lot of that, James, my opinion, is we do a poor job of training people effectively to get them to the point where the perfect close would actually work very well. So let me ask you, for the audience, from your perspective, where do we fall short on the training side when it comes to getting salespeople to the point where they could utilize the book and utilize it well?
Oh my gosh. Well, if you ask me where to start, the first thing I would do is I've just met so many folks that have this challenge, right? Is they may not have originally gotten in sales because they wanted to be a career salesperson like I did. They might have got drafted into sales like I did. And so they have the wrong idea of what selling is. That's like this foundational thing that you have to get past. Yes. And they think it's about persuasion or they think it's about manipulation. And sometimes they completely change their personality when they get in front of people. And you're like, dude, it does not have to be that complicated. And they're just, so the very first place I like to start is just, look, you have to be genuine and authentic. You have to be your own personality. So if the approaches or the language that somebody else is giving you isn't working for you, well, then change it so it's matching with your personality. But you have to have the right intention when you're going into the customer. You can't go in with commission breath. Because literally in the first 2 seconds of when you meet a person, they size up, first of all, they size up whether or not, can I trust this guy? They try to figure out what your intention is, whether it's good or bad. Is this guy trying to help me or is he trying to hurt me? And then second, they try to figure out how competent you are at doing that. So absolutely. They're like, oh, this guy, it could be, hey, this guy's a Yahoo, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Or it could be, wow, this guy seems like he's got his act together. I think I might want to listen to this guy. And so, but here's the thing is the warmth, right, or that intention, it gets weighed in first. That's the first judgment that they make. Mm-hmm. And it is stronger and heavier than competency. And so the classic mistake that most salespeople make is they play very heavily into competency. They'll say, if I have the best solution, I will win the deal. And that is not the case. That is not the case. No. What they're going to judge for, if in fact you could have absolutely the bestest, solution out there. But if they judge that your intentions are flawed, what the data shows is in most cases, you're done. You're done. Right. If they think, oh, this guy's trying to trick me, or this guy's trying to, right, he's withholding information or something. If they mistrust you for whatever reason, then usually the deal's off. And it doesn't matter how great you are at creating the solution. And that explains why a lot of salespeople actually lose to inferior systems, is because somebody else comes in and they're not trying to do all that stuff.
Right. Well, at the same time, you got the problem of the salesperson who looks, acts, sounds like every other salesperson. So now you're just a commodity. If I want to buy whatever you're selling, I can get it from any of three people. So I'm just going to bring it down to a bidding war, a negotiation phase, or something of that nature. And I believe that all of this is dealt into the deck by the way we train salespeople, James, because we bring people into companies and we beat them to death on product knowledge. And so people, they get locked into, as you mentioned, they get locked into that competency, and they begin to believe that being a salesperson is about taking on a role and sounding like something they aren't. And so they appear quite at odds with what a business person actually wants. And that's simply someone who can come in and impact their business positively. You know, I've had this conversation as recently as this afternoon. If you're being asked early, what is your price? That's a key indicator that you're viewed as a commodity, right? I mean,
absolutely.
It's pretty simple stuff. So the question is, how do we change our training to get past some of the things that you're talking about? What do you do differently if you own a company?
Well, the first thing I did again is, and I've managed my own sales teams, and I do that today, right? I still have my own sales team today. So first thing, get your head changed around what selling actually is. Selling is not about manipulating. It's not about persuading. It is facilitating good decision-making and action on behalf of a client that moves the client towards whatever their goal is. That's right. What it is. And so there are guys out there that might disagree with me, but if you listen to what I said there, it's about facilitating good decision-making and action on their behalf to move them towards their goal. You're a coach. That's what selling really is, right? You're not trying to manipulate them or any of that. You're just trying to help them understand the world around them in an area where they don't have perfect knowledge. And you're going to help them get to whatever their goal is. And guys, sometimes that will include you, and sometimes it won't include you as you start to discover what the customer is trying to do. Right. And that's it. So that's the first thing is, if you understand that, then what happens is people can relax and they can just be themselves when they go in there and think, how can I help these guys out? And then you won't be telegraphing all of this nonverbal language that you'll be sending out if you're leaning into it thinking, oh, I got to close this guy. I got to make him right. I'm going to talk him into it. Right. And I would just say this. Control is an illusion, guys. You don't have nearly as much control as you think you have. So why don't you just enjoy the selling process a lot better and try to help the customer however you can? Ironically, the data shows that you'll actually close more if you do that rather than trying to be all tricky about your technique that you're using and talk them into and I have plenty of train wreck stories of my own of having tried to do that and it just doesn't work, right? So later when you're like just being yourself and trying to help the customer, you're like, oh man, this is so much easier and funner, than that other stuff I was trying.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we need to change in terms of how sales leaders approach the preparation phase of getting a salesperson ready to go out into the field is we've got to quit calling them sales calls, and we've got to quit saying you need to go out and sell, because those imply certain things to me physiologically and psychologically. I go, okay, my role is to go sell. It's to make a sales call, which means, again, the illusion of control. I'm going to go out and drive the process and the conversation, and ultimately I'm going to manipulate you into making a decision in my favor, when the real objective is to impact a business positively in such a way that they perceive, hey, this is value I can't do without. In my opinion, we need to start calling them value creation calls. Let's go out and create some value.
Way better. Well, saying, hey, go sell that guy, that implies you're going to do something to that person. And that's not what this is, right? You're doing something with them. You're trying to help them. So the best way to look about it is you're really kind of a leader and a coach. And all of us, doesn't matter what your goal is, we'll all love to have a coach help us get to wherever we're trying to go at our own pace, right? And so we can do a better job as salespeople in general. My observation is we can do a lot better job in general of helping to facilitate people and getting them to their goals. But a couple of things that I would change on the training side, since you brought it up, is the discovery part of the process is probably the most critical aspect of the whole sales process. It's just understanding what the customer's trying to do, having a clear picture, what are the resources available to them to solve that problem, and then what are the implications of them doing or not doing certain things, and then again facilitating their understanding of that. If you do a great job at the discovery side, it will ultimately uncover for the customer and you, it's a benefit to you, what the value of making some kind of changes. And you can do that on the very first encounter with the customer. You can do it on the back of an envelope, right? And then they understand, oh, wow, this problem is a much bigger problem than I thought it was, right? We'll call it $1 million problem. And if your solution is a $20,000 solution, guys, they will never push back on your your margins. They'll never push back on the price because it's a 5x or it could be a 50x multiplier over what you're charging for it.
Right.
But you need to know, and there's a process to this, you need to know the process of how to get that information out of the customer in a way that helps to turn the light bulb on for them. Right. That's because if you don't do that, what happens somewhere later in the sales cycle is they start thinking, wow, I'm about to spend a bunch of money on this. Is this really worth doing? And if you didn't do that with them, okay, at the very beginning of the process, at the very end, after they already have your proposal, well, what will happen is they will go silent on you while they try to figure it out on their own without you. And so it's really just better to do it at the beginning part as you're facilitating the discovery and the understanding. They will value it. It will be inherently valuable to them because they may not have thought through all that stuff.
Absolutely.
So change your perspective on what selling is. I would do some discovery. And probably the third thing I would add is to teach the sales team what actually happens inside a client's organization when they start using your solution. Right. So I would argue that probably 90% of all sales training is not really sales training. It's product training.
Well, of course. Absolutely.
And so your product, great. But do you really know how the customer is using your product? Do you know what their world is like? And so a couple of things that I have done to try to solve this problem is I will have a client that's happy come in and talk to my team about how they use the solution and how it makes a difference for them, right? That's very efficient for me because I have one person parachute in, tell the whole team. Another way that I've done in the past is I create a internship. And what this means, when I get a brand new salesperson, I'm going to send them out to their office as an employee, and they are going to use the solution that we offer in their environment as an employee. They're literally doing work every day for a period of time, usually a week. And then they understand what's actually going on in the client's world, because this is the main complaint that a lot of clients have is they complain that the salesperson doesn't really get them and doesn't really understand what they do as a business. Instead, after you've been through your internship, the salesperson can say, you know what? When I did my internship at such and such a place, we did it this way and it made this kind of a difference.
Oh, so powerful.
Your credibility just goes through the roof after that, right? Because you're saying, we're the same. I did what you're doing, right?
Yes.
And so anyway, if you're a sales leader and you're on this call, that is like pure gold. Just go find a client. They're going to get your salesperson for free. So you're paying their payroll while they go do work for your client. So your client gets free work, but what you get is you get training that you can't get in any of
Oh, you get world-class training. It's putting the training into context. Such an important part of training. It's often missing. Well, for this reason and the other two that James mentioned, a lot of deals get stuck. And the topic of James's next book about unsticking deals and how to prevent deals from getting stuck, coming up next. We're going to talk to him about that very topic. Stay with us. Hey, thanks for making Sales Untraining your first listen of the week. And if you find something you like, if you hear something that's interesting, I hope you'll share it with somebody you know. You can find out more about me at bizlockerroom.com or email me, kelly@bizlockerroom.com. Now back to the show. You're basically tearing up $100 bills and throwing them in the trash can. You're paying someone a lot of money, somebody very capable, somebody very good at what they do, to get minimal impact. If you don't have a sales leader who's capable of reinforcing the very things that you're training on, and if you don't make it a part of the plan following the training to do exactly that, how good is it? How effective is it going to be? I mean, do you even measure the impact of your sales training? Or do you just check a box? Hey, welcome back. I'm Kelly Riggs. This is Sales Untraining, your weekly sales strategy guide designed to completely rewire your sales brain. And I hope that you'll like and subscribe to the podcast. Certainly, I hope you'll share it, especially this episode. My special guest, James Muir. Again, he's the author of The Perfect Close, and he's got a brand new book coming out next year. I've read some of the work so far, and I am really excited about it because it deals with a really important topic in the world of sales, and that's when deals get stuck. And trust me, if you've been in sales a minute, you've had some deals get stuck. You get ghosted, or it feels like you're in follow-up purgatory. You can't get anything working. It just, it's the worst feeling ever, James. And I love the book when you finally get it out and get it in final form. It's going to talk about two pieces. If you've got a deal, how do you unstick one you've got right now? Or even better, preventative, proactive, how do we prevent deals from getting unstuck? But in my experience, this is, again, one of those areas of training that we typically don't dive into. Talk a little bit about what training looks like to try to train people to keep their deals from getting stuck in the first place.
Oh my gosh. Well, like we talked about before, I think 90% of all training is actually product training. It's not even sales training.
Yeah, exactly.
And the problem is that product training is not where clients actually get value. Right? They actually don't care. I know this will be offensive to some people, but they really don't care about your solution at all. They only care about it in the sense that it can produce a result. Right? That's all they're caring about. So it's in the insights and the challenges of their industry that their industry is experiencing, and maybe the implications of that, and then the implications of what they're doing now, and maybe the impact of considering maybe doing something different. That's where they get value but that makes your conversation with them inherently valuable when you're talking to them about those things. But in terms of what causes deals to get stuck, there's basically just three things, and the majority of those things are all sales issues. Right? So I feel like if you stack the three together, the biggest slice of the pie is actually sales issues. And so when you adopt the right sales process, what it ends up doing is it prevents the sales from sticking, because you've just executed the correct process. Not a lot of folks have actually ever even learned a process. They get thrown into sales, and so they might read it in a book, or they might even be trying to apply a process that they learned when they were in one industry, and now they're in a totally different industry, and the rules are a little bit different in this new industry because maybe before it was a simple sale, and now maybe you're in a complex sale. And so the rules are just a little bit different. So by training the sales process, you're going to end up preventing those. And then, of course, there's some very specific strategies, which I'm sure you read. And we can talk about those if you want to share some of those with the audience.
Well, I think it's important because people oftentimes, when deals get stuck, James, the tendency is to go, it's not me, it's them. It's something that's going on with them. And
right. How could it be us?
It couldn't be me. I mean, clearly I know everything there is to know about my product, right? So, but I think it's important to understand that from a training perspective, if you're in the training process and you begin to acclimate salespeople towards the idea that, hey, deals can get stuck, and usually they get stuck because of us and what we do or fail to do appropriately. So there are things that we can do proactively. You address that in a big way in the book, but let's start with a deal that's already stuck. Right. In the time that we have available, let's talk about kind of that process you go through. If you've got one that's stuck now, how do you diagnose it, and how can I begin to unstick it if I'm going to have a chance to win the opportunity?
Well, it might make sense to share what the three things are that causes deals to be stuck to begin with.
Absolutely.
Basically, the three things that cause deals to be stuck are sales issues, client indecision, and business case issues. And when you survey, by the way, sales leaders and salespeople, you say, hey, why is your deal stuck? Like, they very disproportionately think it's their business case that is the problem. When in reality, the majority of the problem is they've executed something wrong in their sales process. And it depends on whether your process is a little more simple or a little more complex. But there's kind of five main things that are part of a sales issues. The top five things that cause deals to stick on the sales side is bad targeting, which is you're trying to sell to somebody you shouldn't be selling to.
Right.
And the answer to that is just to target better. So spend a little more time investing in what your ideal customer looks like, and then have enough discipline to try to not sell to sometimes we get one that comes in an inbound that isn't a match. So the answer when that happens is just qualify. And you're going to qualify using the same criteria that you were going to use to target. And if they don't meet that, I'm not saying throw them away, but you're going to give them a lower priority than the ones that are ideal targets, because they get stuck more often. They have longer sales cycles. They're less profitable. If they weren't those things, they'd be your ideal client, right?
Right. Absolutely.
On the client indecision side, we could just kind of summarize this: is they're uncertain about something in the deal. They're uncertain either about something about your offer. They're uncertain about how you're comparing to a competitor. Believe it or not, in complex sales, about 2/3, okay, so this is not a small factor I'm sharing with you, about 2/3 of the concern that a client has is their own ability to execute the change that is needed to get the result that you're promising. And so
Absolutely.
a lot of salespeople, they will pile on with, oh, you're going to get all these great results. They keep piling on benefits and the benefit of changing when the customer is not worried about that. What they're worried about is, I'm going to screw it up, right? And so you have to shift to address client indecision. You have to shift throughout the process. You're going to shift from selling the value of the change. You're going to shift to that they can't fail. You're going to switch to that there is no risk, and you're going to minimize risk. And there's lots of different ways of minimizing risk, but basically, client indecision is about making sure the client feels comfortable that there's no way they can lose on it. Right.
And ultimately, this is about taking fear out of the equation, isn't it?
I mean, 100%. That is exactly what is going on.
Fear of looking bad, fear of making a bad decision, fear of loss. I mean, there's so many things that are going on here. And we know that emotion is the driver in decision making. And suddenly, what sounded great when we were looking at your paper proposal, when I start to consider, oh my goodness, there's so many ways to mess this up, to look bad, to make a bad decision. My boss is going to say, what were you thinking? Right. And suddenly a deal gets stuck and salespeople have no idea.
And guys, in that scenario, it has nothing to do with the value prop or your business case. That's right. The thing. And so many salespeople think that that's where the problem is. Oh, I'm going to solve the problem I'll discount it. I'll make the value of the deal look better by discounting. That's not the problem. You're fighting the wrong thing, right? And so what you need to do is understand what's the concern that the client has. And sometimes they're not all that forthcoming about the fact that they have these fears, or sometimes they're not even completely aware that they have the fear. They just know that they're not feeling quite comfortable about it yet. So there's some very specific things you can do to identify what it is. And then there's a lot of strategy you can do to mitigate the risk, not the least of which we talked about in the other segment, which is identify the value of making the change for them right from the beginning. Right. So at least they won't be afraid that they're not going to get a big enough return. Then you want to minimize the risk that they're going to do. And there's lots of ways you can do that. One of those is you can take the risk off of them. But anything that you can do instead of the client doing it, that's going to make them feel more comfortable, because now the monkey's on your back to get it done instead of them. And you can do that with guarantees, and you can do that with there's actually about a dozen different strategies you can do to mitigate risk. But those are the things that the client's looking for because they're afraid. And the ironic thing is customers are about twice as afraid of screwing up as they are of being desirous for the gain that your solution
Absolutely
is. So
right.
It is much stronger a dynamic than your gain. But salespeople tend to be wired. They're very moved toward goal-oriented creatures. And so we project that onto the customer. And so we're always selling the upside, when in reality, you kind of need to sell that you can't lose, right?
Yeah.
That's a big factor.
Absolutely.
The last thing is, Kelly, is that business case. And just as a quick little thing, when it comes to your business case, there's basically just three components. There's muchness, how much of a return is there? There's soonness, how soon does the return happen? And then there is sureness, which we just talked about. It's really about certainty.
Right.
How certain am I to get the return that you're promising? Since client indecision is about addressing certainty, if you've already addressed all of your sales issues and all of your client indecision, there's only two things to worry about on your business case, and that's the muchness of it and the soonness of it. And the truth is, these are the easiest things to do. So if you get a stuck deal, start with the sales issues, then think about the client indecision issues, and then go to your business case last. Right. And there's lots of ways you can change. Like, let's say the muchness is the problem. There's lots of ways you can change the muchness without ever changing the price. I know that sounds like unintuitive, but I'm telling you, that is exactly the case. You got to think Absolutely about TCO, right. Total cost of ownership, versus just your price for today. Okay. Yes. And that's, most people think it's a very one-dimensional, it's just the price, and it's way more complicated than that. Agreed. And the good news is, because of that, you don't have to fight on the price basis. You can fight on these other areas. Same thing with the soonness part of it, which is, if you can deliver your return, like when there's a crisis, I don't know, let's just pretend there was a pandemic or something, right? So if there's a crisis like that, people do not invest in opportunities that take 3 years to turn. They don't. And so what happens is, when they think their house is on fire, some kind of crisis is happening, you really got to produce a return in maybe 6 to 12 months at the max, right? Or maybe even sooner, depending on the kind of product that you're delivering. And so you need to think through, what are the different ways we can improve or increase the sureness? Again, there's probably more than a dozen strategies you can do to increase your, not sureness, but the soonness, right, of your return. And you don't even have to win muchness as long as you can win sureness and soonness. And I know that's perplexing, but it happens all the time, all the time. So
this is
those
gold.
are the three. These are the three things. I would do it in that order. Check your sales issues first, your client indecision, and then business case last.
And then your business case. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Here's what I'm hearing you say. Salespeople, typically average salespeople, lead with the wrong thing. We call that products. They don't discover the business case and the application. They lead with product. They follow up with tons of information. When it starts to get stuck, they pile on more information. They go too fast and they go too hard. And all they do is contribute to the fear factor that's involved. And it all has to do with the way we've sort of positioned people to go out and move product rather than go out and solve real problems. And that leads to a lot of stuck deals. Is that fair?
Yes, you nailed it. I agree 100%.
Man, that's good stuff. I can't wait for your new book. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be as amazing as this book, folks. It's called The Perfect Close. And if you don't have a copy, trust me, you're missing out. This is on my absolute must-read list for anybody who wants to be great in sales. He's James Muir. Hey, where can we find you online? Where can people find out more about you?
Sure. Probably the best place is the website, which is puremuir.com. It's PUREMUIR.com. And then I'm very active on LinkedIn and I'm active on Twitter. So both those are great. You're certainly welcome to follow me on Facebook if you're if you want to see my personal life. But those are probably probably the main two. Yeah.
Hey, thanks for being a guest, James Muir, and we'll see all of you next time on Sales Untraining.
Sales Untraining is a production of Business Locker Room and Pod About It Productions. Music and editing by Doug Branson. To get more Kelly, visit bizlockerroom.com.